រយៈពេលដែលខ្ញុំធ្វើការគឺមានរយៈពេល8 ឆ្នាំហើយក្នុងនោះខ្ញុំគ្រប់គ្រងកូនក្រុម36នាក់ទៅលើក្រុម D 15 ក្រុមកាលពី8 ឆ្នាំទៅ10 ឆ្នាំមុនណាគឺដូចខ្លួនឯងដូចនៅក្នុងដងដូចកែបក្នុងដងរស់នៅម្នាក់ឯងអត់ហ៊ានបង្ហាញការពិតឲ្យអ្នកដទៃដឹងពីមុនខ្ញុំអត់ហ៊ានកាត់សក់ដោយសារខ្ញុំខ្លាចគេរើសអើងមិនទទួលយកខ្ញុំធ្វើការខ្លាចបារម្ភអញ្ចឹងនៅកន្លែងការងារនិយាយរួមគេនិយាយរាល់ថ្ងៃគេសួររាល់ថ្ងៃស្រឡាញ់ពេលដូចគ្នាអញ្ចឹងបានប្រយោជន៍អីគេស្រឡាញ់ស្រីហ្នឹងបានប្រយោជន៍អីនិយាយរួមទៅច្រើនណាខ្ញុំឈឺចាប់មែនទែន
មួយចំនួននេះដែលគាត់នៅតែនិយាយថាស្រឡាញ់គ្នាមួយស្រីដូចគ្នាហ្នឹងមិនធ្វើមិនអីមិនចឹងចេះថាចឹងណាខ្ញុំចាក់ផ្សេងគេធ្លាប់ឮថាពេលមុនគឺថាគាត់មិនខ្លួនប្រុសទេតែគាត់ធ្វើស្រីដល់ពេលគាត់ទៅធ្វើតែងចឹងទៅមុនវងថាយកដល់ពេលមើលក្នុងតញ្ញាណបានឯកសារគាត់ថាគាត់ជាមនុស្សប្រុសគេបែរជាថាអត់យកវិញអញ្ចឹងណា
ធម្មតាតែយើងអញ្ចឹងគេតែនឹងនិយាយឯងជួនកាលគេអត់និយាយមុខយើងគេនិយាយក្រោយខ្នងយើងក្រោយពេលដែលខ្ញុំបញ្ជ្រាបចូលជាមួយនឹងសហគមន៍ឥណ្ឌនូខ្ញុំបានយោបល់ពីពួកគាត់ប្រើសិទ្ធិខ្លួនឯងទទួលស្គាល់អ្វីដែលថាអ្វីដែលខ្លួនមានលែងភ័យខ្លាចនឹងការរើសអើងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំទៅធ្វើអ្វីដែលខ្លួនខ្ញុំមានតែចង់បានអញ្ចឹងទៅខ្ញុំអាចមកប្រឆាំងនៅអ្វីដែលគេរើសអើងខ្ញុំបាន
ផ្នែកការងារហើយនឹងការអប់រំមិនទាន់មានការទទួលស្គាល់ឬក៏មិនទាន់មានការគ្រប់គ្រងក្នុងការផ្ដល់ឱកាសការងារឲ្យស្មើគ្នាហើយក៏ដូចគ្នាផងដែរពេលដែលយើងមានកោលនយោបាយឬក៏ច្បាប់ស្ដីអំពីការមិនរើសអើងនៅកន្លែងការងារហ្នឹងវាធ្វើឲ្យអ្នកធ្វើការទទួលបានអារម្មណ៍កក់ក្ដៅមានទទួលបានការការពារការគ្រប់គ្រងពីសំណាក់ក្រុមការងារហើយនិងស្ថាប័នទាំងមូលអញ្ចឹងអាចឲ្យពួកគាត់នឹងទទួលបានឱកាសក្នុងការចូលរួមអភិវឌ្ឍស្ថាប័នតាមរយៈជំនាញរបស់គាត់តាមរយៈបទពិសោធន៍របស់គាត់តាមរយៈចំណេះដឹងរបស់គាត់ក្នុងការចូលរួមសម្រាប់ចិត្តឬក៏ចូលរួមទទួលបានលទ្ធផលទៅលើស្ថាប័នទាំងអស់ហ្នឹងហើយបុគ្គលខ្លួនឯងហ្នឹងក៏គាត់មានអារម្មណ៍ថាកក់ក្ដៅអត់ត្រូវបានគេមើលលើមើលក្រោមអត់ត្រូវបានគេវិនិច្ឆ័យថាជាបុគ្គលបែបណាសំខាន់គឺមានសមត្ថភាពមានជំនាញមានចំណេះក្នុងការធ្វើការជាមួយគ្នាធ្វើការរួមគ្នាក្នុងការសម្រេចឲ្យបានលទ្ធផលសមិទ្ធផលការងាររបស់ខ្លួនតាមទំហំការងារនីមួយហើយគាត់ក៏ទទួលបានចំណូលដែលមានឯករាជ្យភាពក្នុងការចូលរួមគ្រប់គ្រងខ្លួនឯងគ្រប់គ្រងសមាជិកគ្រួសារដែលនៅជាមួយគ្នាហើយក៏វាជួយរួមចំណែកក្នុងការកាត់បន្ថយភាពក្រីក្រហើយក៏ចូលរួមចំណែកក្នុងការអភិវឌ្ឍសេដ្ឋកិច្ចជាតិយើងផងដែរនៅពេលដែលស្ថាប័នឬក៏ក្រុមហ៊ុនដែលគាត់មានគោលនយោបាយដែលគាត់មានច្បាប់គ្រប់គ្រងឬក៏មិនរើសអើងទៅលើអ្នកស្រឡាញ់ភេទដូចគ្នាហ្នឹងគឺធ្វើឲ្យគាត់បញ្ជាក់ប្រាប់ស្ថាប័នផ្សេងទៀតថាភាពជាគំរូនៃការដឹកនាំនៃការផ្ដល់ឱកាសឲ្យបុគ្គលម្នាក់ហ្នឹងដោយមិនគិតពីអត្តសញ្ញាណភេទមិនគិតពីអត្តសញ្ញាណ gender ក្នុងការចូលរួមអនុវត្តសម្រាប់ចិត្តក្នុងការចូលរួមបម្រើការងារជាមួយគ្នាមួយទៀតហ្នឹងភាពជាគំរូហ្នឹងក៏វាជួយដល់អ្នកស្រឡាញ់ភេទដូចគ្នាខ្លួនឯងផងដែរព្រោះនៅណាក៏គេអត់រើសអើងនៅណាក៏គេទទួលស្គាល់អញ្ចឹងក៏គាត់សប្បាយចិត្តហើយក៏គាត់មានមោទនភាពក្នុងការធ្វើម៉េចរៀនធ្វើម៉េចឲ្យមានបទពិសោធន៍ក្នុងការជ្រើសរើសកន្លែងដែលខ្លួនឯងស្រឡាញ់ជ្រើសរើសកន្លែងដែលខ្លួនឯងពេញចិត្តផងដែរ
មិនមែនទាន់មាន 100% ដែលគ្រប់គ្រងមួយខ្ញុំទេនៅតែមានអញ្ចឹងក្នុងចំណោម10នាក់យ៉ាងហោចណាស់ក៏នៅ2នាក់នៅតែរើសអើងអញ្ចឹងដែរហ្នឹងសំខាន់ដូចខ្ញុំនិយាយអញ្ចឹងខាង GM ខាង admin ខាងអីហ្នឹងគាត់អត់ខ្វល់ទេសំខាន់គឺគាត់មានសមត្ថភាពធ្វើការឲ្យគេបាន
គ្រូចាក់ខ្ញុំហ្នឹងមិនមែនមានតែសុខអានមួយដែលស្អាតដូចគ្នាមានច្រើនគូដែលមានចង់10គូបាត់កម្មគឺធម្មតាអត់មានតែប៉ះពាល់ទាំងអស់បើចំទៅការងារខ្ញុំធ្វើជាមួយគាត់ហ្នឹងតមួយសុខអានហ្នឹងគឺរយៈពេល6ឆ្នាំហើយការងារកន្លងមកដល់ហ្នឹងគឺយើងធ្វើការសហការគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមកយើងអាចសួរនាំគ្នាទៅវិញទៅមក Job សកម្មនេះល្អរលូនអត់ដែលមានបញ្ហាសម្រាប់មួយសុខអានកន្លងមកដែលខ្ញុំធ្វើការជាមួយអ្នកមានភេទដូចគ្នាហ្នឹងច្រើនក្រុមដែរក៏តែការងារគាត់ល្អប្រសើរល្អប្រសើរល្អជាចំល្អអត់មានដែរមានបញ្ហាទាំងអស់ហើយប្រតិកម្មយើងក៏រលូនទៅមុខអត់មានប៉ះពាល់អីទាំងអស់
ចំពោះនយោជកទៅតាមស្ថាប័នវិញសូមឲ្យគាត់ពិចារណាហើយគិតគូរទៅដល់ការផ្ដល់ឱកាសស្មើគ្នាសម្រាប់បេក្ខជនឬក៏បេក្ខភាពក្នុងការចូលរួមបម្រើការងារក្នុងវិស័យការងារទៅលើស្ថាប័នរបស់គាត់ហ្នឹងដោយមិនគិតអំពីអត្តសញ្ញាណភេទអត្តសញ្ញាណ gender គឺផ្ដោតទៅលើបទពិសោធន៍សមត្ថភាពហើយនិងចំណេះដឹងដែលបេក្ខភាពមាន
ខ្ញុំសូមសំណូមពរទៅដល់រោងចក្រផ្សេងសហគ្រាសរោងចក្រក្រុមហ៊ុនផ្សេងក៏មានការរើសអើងជាមួយនឹងអ្នកដែលស្លាប់ពីគ្នាព្រោះគាត់សមត្ថភាពគាត់ធ្វើការដូចបានមនុស្សទូទៅដែរទី1ទី2យើងត្រូវយល់អំពីចង់និយាយថាសិទ្ធិមនុស្សសិទ្ធិរស់រានកុំមានការរើសអើង
ខ្ញុំសូមដល់តកាយរោងចក្រនិងអ្នកដឹកនាំប្រទេសទាំងអស់កុំរើសអើងអ្នកស្រឡាញ់ភេទដូចគ្នាព្រោះអីពួកគាត់ក៏អត់ចង់អញ្ចឹងដែរធ្វើម៉េចពីកំណើតគាត់ត្រូវអញ្ចឹងកុំបាច់រើសអើងថាគាត់ជាភេទអីត្រូវទទួលគាត់យកធ្វើការទៅហើយសូមសំណូមពរដល់ថ្នាក់ខាងលើហ្នឹងឲ្យពួកគាត់បានទទួលស្គាល់ពួកយើងស្រឡាញ់ភេទដូចគ្នាចូលក្នុងសង្គមឲ្យបានដូចគេដូចឯងអញ្ចឹងណា
ហើយសូមជួយចែករំលែកបទពិសោធន៍និងផ្ដល់សិទ្ធិឬក៏បើកផ្លូវបង្ហាញផ្លូវថាធ្វើកន្លែងណាដែលល្អជួយនាំគ្នាទៅកន្លែងល្អហើយសូមឲ្យពុកម៉ែបងប្អូននឹងយល់ពីអារម្មណ៍មួយនឹងផងអត់មានអ្នកគេចង់អញ្ចឹងទេសំខាន់ថាអ្នកដែលធ្វើនឹងតើគាត់ធ្វើអីប៉ះពាល់ដល់យើងអត់បើគាត់មិនបានធ្វើអីប៉ះពាល់ទេគឺសូមជួយឲ្យថាផ្ដល់ក្តីស្រឡាញ់ភាពកក់ក្ដៅដល់ពួកគាត់ផងព្រោះអីតែគាត់អញ្ចឹងគាត់ឯកោ
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm Oliver Chapman, Senior Social Development Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. Welcome to our event to mark the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia and Biphobia 2022. And thank you all for joining. We have some exciting content today, and I hope you'll find it as interesting as we have in putting the agenda together. We are also very pleased to be supported today by Chantal Wong, the US Executive Director, Director General Kenichi Yokoyama from our South Asia Department, and Louise Cord from the World Bank to demonstrate our excellent collaboration on some important research and in taking this agenda forward. Just a couple of quick reminders before we start. Please keep your mics on mute and turn your videos off. Please put your questions in the chat box. And both Samreen from my SOGI research team and I and our civil society speakers will be available for answering the questions towards the end of the agenda. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Kenichi Yokoyama, Director General of the South Asia Regional Department at ADB, who will deliver opening remarks. We're especially excited to welcome DG Kenichi as his department has been doing excellent work on gender equality and social inclusion, or 𝗃𝗍𝒄𝒃, which incorporates SOGI inclusion. DG Kenichi has been in his current post since May 2020 and oversees operations in 7 sector divisions and 6 country offices in South Asia, as well as regional cooperation initiatives. Having first joined ADB in 1999, he has served previously as country director of both India and Nepal resident missions. Over to you, DG Kenichi.
Thank you very much, Oliver. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Kenichi Yokoyama, the DG of the South Asia Department of ADB. And on behalf of ADB, we are delighted to host this event for the 4th year in succession on the occasion of the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, or IDAHOTB. Marking this day accentuates the importance of inclusive development, as we know that the sexual orientation and gender identity is a critical factor which compounds existing gender inequalities in our societies, with gender minorities often amongst the most excluded in our societies. It is a tribute to the courage and the resilience of a community which experiences the challenges of discrimination and violence in all aspects of their lives. For ADB, our commitment on sexual orientation and gender identity, or SOGI inclusion, is rooted in our strategy 2030, with operational priority 1, committing to reducing inequalities through social inclusion, and operational priority 2, to accelerate progress in gender equality. I'm proud to say that the South Asia Department, which covers Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, has been leading the way for gender equality and social inclusion, or 𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗃𝗃. This approach, which started in 2010, recognizes how gender inequalities is intertwined with other dimensions of exclusion and vulnerability based on age, disability, social identity, sexual orientation, and gender identity, income, and location. And by today, we have almost 130 projects in which 𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗃 is mainstreamed and pretty much focused. And we also have a good record of more than 90% of projects has been rated to successful as far as 𝗃𝗲𝗃𝗃 integration is concerned. And also we are trying to expand our areas in policy level dialogues and rules and regulations of our member countries. So acknowledging the intersectionality between gender inequalities and other forms of exclusion and vulnerability, it calls for concerted actions to transform discriminatory policies, practices, and mindsets. It further recognizes that intersectional inequalities are important and need to be addressed. For example, women often experience gender-based discrimination, whereas lesbians and trans women may experience additional levels of exclusion above those faced by other women. So today, soon, we will hear from 𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗃𝗀, Global Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion in the World Bank's Sustainable Development Practice Group. We are delighted that she is joining us to celebrate our evolving partnership to address the needs voiced by the community, and especially the joint ADB World Bank Group research on legal barriers to sexual and gender minority inclusion. It is significant to see this collaboration between multilateral development banks. Together, we can share knowledge to understand and respond to the multiple and intersecting aspects of exclusion and vulnerability faced by this community and others experiencing disadvantage. The joint research on legal barriers is important to expand our knowledge base. Legal barriers are debilitating because they impede inclusion in other dimensions of life and reinforce exclusion. They restrict access to areas such as public services, including health, education, and social protection, housing services, and labor markets. So today's event will explore these connections, first by discussing the legal situation with experts from civil society, and second by listening to personal stories of experiences that are directly affected by legal challenges from different groups of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and others, what's called LGBTI+ community in South Asia. Before I close, I'd like to extend a special welcome to our audiences, both from and outside of ADB. Through the work of SOGI inclusion, we are forming increasingly close bonds with the LGBTI+ civil society and those working in the field of SOGI inclusion research in academia. We welcome you all and look forward to rich discussion that complements all our work to create an inclusive region And I particularly like to thank Francesco Tornieri in South Asia Department, who is the pioneering this initiative, leading our South Asia operations. And I thank you very much, and I wish to have a fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DG Kenichi, for setting out the topic so well. You will now hear from 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗃, the World Bank's Global Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion. Louise has many years of experience managing World Bank operations across Africa and Latin America, as well as managing their poverty global practice. Let's hear from Louise.
Hello, I'm 𝗵𝗂𝗀𝗃, Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank. I am honored to be here today with the Asian Development Bank for the commemoration of the International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia, otherwise known as IDAHOTB. The ADB and the World Bank, together with other multilateral institutions, have worked together over the past few years to jointly commemorate IDAHOTB. But the ADB World Bank collaboration on the LGBT+ agenda extends beyond the commemoration of this important day to sharing of lessons learned by the World Bank since 2015 on data and analytics, as well as operations. The ADB is a great partner and provides leadership in the Asia-Pacific region on addressing gender equality and social inclusion. And I am confident that on SOGI inclusion, as in so many other areas, our two institutions will be learning a lot from each other in the years to come. Our joint work is a critical part of this important agenda. Despite the important progress that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex people have made globally, exclusion based on sexual orientation and gender identity remains far too pervasive in daily life. For the past few years, the World Bank has been working to improve the inclusion of sexual and gender minorities through policies that seek to prevent discrimination in investment lending, training of staff and government counterparts, and research that supports positive development outcomes for LGBTI people. I'd like to focus my remarks today on the research portion of this work. A first step towards building an inclusive society is understanding the legal and institutional challenges faced by sexual and gender minorities that prevent them from fully participating in, benefiting from, and contributing to the economy on an equal footing with others. The World Bank is committed to expanding the evidence base for social inclusion, most recently through the launch of the Equality of Opportunity for Sexual and Gender Minorities, or EcoSOGI report, which offers critical insights around legislation and regulations affecting sexual and gender minorities across 16 countries of diverse socioeconomic status. The report measures 6 indicators to identify differences in the legal treatment of sexual and gender minorities, including in areas such as education, employment, and protection from hate crimes. The study shows that while more countries have taken important steps towards equality for sexual minorities, now more than ever, we need to expand our understanding of the unique constraints that LGBTI people face in accessing critical services. Therefore, EcoSOGI will be moving to a new phase to cover a lot more countries around the world, including in Asia, with our strong partnership with the ADB. The ADB is taking up the analysis of legal barriers to SOGI inclusion, which encompasses at greater length issues of gender identity and sex characteristics. This is a welcome advancement that the World Bank will seek to incorporate in our research as well. The new research will allow us to engage in development outcomes analysis and identify possible links between SOGI inclusion and levels of economic development. Data on legislation that protects or discriminates based on SOGI is central to helping tackle SOGI-based exclusion, discrimination, and violence. We welcome this new partnership with the ADB and other development partners to expand this analysis. Ensuring for sexual and gender minorities inclusion is both a challenge and an opportunity, one that remains central to our mission and our partnership with you at the ADB. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Louise. It was great to hear from both Kenichi and Louise of the importance of cross-MDB collaboration, and they also both demonstrated the progress being made, in generating knowledge on tackling exclusion, with DG Kenichi discussing the intersectionality between gender inequalities and other forms of exclusion and vulnerability, and Director Cord talked about the linkage between SOGI inclusion and levels of economic development, as well as highlighting the importance of inclusion of all diverse sexual and gender minorities, including through our joint research. We'll now turn towards our first main content segment. Our South Asia department have put together a series of stories from the pandemic and wider experiences of inclusion and exclusion in South Asia amongst LGBTQI populations. A special thanks goes out to 𝗂𝗲𝗃𝗀𝗃 for tirelessly putting this segment together, and to Francesco Tornieri for all his support, and to the CSOs, Bandhu Welfare Society from Bangladesh, Pride Bhutan, and Mitni Nepal. We'll now hear from 𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗏 from Bangladesh, Tenzin Gyaltshen from Bhutan, Kabita Tamang from Nepal, and Kaushal Rangasinghe from Sri Lanka. So let's hear from them. Thank you.
This is 𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗏𝗏. This is a name that I gave to myself, to a new me. I was born as 𝗵𝗏. People know me by that name for long. They consider me as a boy, but I'm a woman, a complete woman from inside. I'm a trans woman, and I had to fight, express and hold this identity. Still I'm suffering at every day, every moment. This fight from my family to straight. I understand it is challenge for them as well to accept me and change my identity. But this is who I am. This is truth of mine. My family always tortured me, abused me. They wanted to make me a man as the way I was born. They used to bring religious and emotional blackmail me so that I can convert again as a man. I was bullied in my school, college and university. Wherever I will go to a public transport, shopping malls, I see hate and disgusted. Hospital, police station, public services offices, I am treated as a Jew animal. One day I went to a hospital for my healthcare services. I was really confused regarding the behaviors of guards and receptionists. First of all, the guards did not allow me in the hospital. He did not allow me because I am a transgender, but I am a trans woman. After that, I argued with him. Then he allowed me to get in the hospital. The receptionist sent me a male doctor, but I didn't prefer, and I don't want to that male doctor will touch my body because I am a woman. After that, the male doctor sent me a women doctor, but the women doctor, she doesn't know how she will provide a service. She didn't aware about the gender and gender identity actually. This kind of situation I really faced, but I have a question, how I will overcome, how I will address this kind of situation in future. After I started wearing female clothes, I see this sexual desire in the people's eyes. Sometimes they will give hints to have sex. They know we don't have any social protection, no system of support us. I have been molested many times for this situation. I have completed a master's degree in management subject. After completing the course, one day I went to my university to get a recommendation letter for my job purpose. But they did not agree to give any recommendation letter due to my gender identity because I am a trans woman. Being a trans woman, I don't see there is any human rights for me. I am considering a criminal in a country. The common law does not protect us, rather it makes suffer us. I am a bit happy that organization like Bandhu is working for the people like us. They are trying human rights, healthcare, life skill, legal aid and counseling. But Bandhu alone cannot bring the whole change in the society. We need more help. During the COVID-19 pandemic situation, Bandhu supported a lot to me. I had a job at Bandhu, therefore I could able to survive my life during the pandemic situation. And others also got support from Bandhu like me as well. People need to feel our pain. There is a misconception about us. This is our basic rights. We need equal opportunity and we work together for the better improvement of the society.
Hello, my name is 𝗵𝗿𝗶𝘃𝗀𝗃. I'm 21 years old and I'm a gay person.
My name is Tishu. I'm 20 years old and I identify myself as a trans man.
For example, my name is 𝗃𝗿𝗃𝗀𝗃 and I'm 22 years old. I identify myself as a trans woman.
As a trans man, I don't feel comfortable wearing kira and keep my hair long. When I went to school, I used to keep my hair short. Because of that, my teacher used to scold me, and of that, I slowly lost my interest in study. I remember being stigmatized by my teacher. Because of that, I almost dropped out from my school.
Being a gay person, sometimes I do face stigma from the strangers. While I was visiting one of the shops in Paro, right after my entrance, there were a group of girls who were staring at me, and then they were fighting about me, like calling my name as 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. 𝗃𝗃 means which is not appropriate word for us. I feel uncomfortable while they were calling me with this name.
Being a trans woman, when going for health services, it's very difficult for us to seek health services because of self-stigma. And even if we're very sick, we don't go to hospital seek any services because of the stigma. If I share my story, recently when I was sick, I went to hospital to get myself checked out. And when I was in the line, there was a guy behind me who knew that I was a trans woman. So he literally started holding me, he was literally touching me, and he was literally pinching my butt and everything. So it made an environment where I couldn't have that confidence to stay or get checked out. So it was so embarrassing for me that I directly went home without getting myself treated. So I think that impacted me in a lot of ways that I rarely go to hospital, or I usually don't go.
To highlight a few of the key challenges and issues faced by the community, I believe that number one would be policy. Although Section 213 and Section 214 of Penal Code of Bhutan, which was commonly known as sodomy law, was amended, but there are no other policies that guarantees protection of 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 population here in Bhutan. There is a very high rate of school dropouts among the trans men, transgender men, transgender women, and then feminine gay populations. We live in is a very close-knit, while everyone actually knows everyone, almost knows everyone. So this kind of incidences, it gets around the community members, and then next time when other communities want to go to health facility, they would not, because they fear that the same thing might happen to them.
नमस्कार, मेरो नाम कविता तामाङ। म मिति नेपाल प्रदेश नम्बर 1 कार्यक्रम संयोजक। म लैङ्गिकताको आधारमा महिला र यौनिकताको आधारमा चाहिँ बाइसेक्सुअल हुँ। यही बाइसेक्सुअलिटीको कारणले मैले जीवनमा धेरै प्रकारका समस्याहरू चाहिँ भोग्नु परेको थियो र अझै पनि चाहिँ भोगी पनि रहेको छु। जब म 19 वर्ष जतिको भएँ त्यस बेला चाहिँ एकजना ट्रान्समेनसँग चाहिँ मेरो प्रेम सम्बन्ध भयो जब कि मलाई त्यो बेला चाहिँ यो जेन्डर आइडेन्टिटी सेक्सुअल ओरिएन्टेसन यसको बारेमा चाहिँ केही पनि जानकारी थिएन होइन अब यसको जानकारी नहुँदा चाहिँ मैले आफ्नो यो फिलिङ्सहरू चाहिँ आफ्नो अनुभूतिहरू चाहिँ आफ्ना साथीहरूसँग सेयर गरेको थिएँ र त्यो बेला चाहिँ मेरो केही साथीहरूले चाहिँ मलाई सकारात्मक रूपमा नै लिनुभयो भने केही साथीहरूले चाहिँ यो कहिले पनि नसुनेको नदेखेको कुरा भनेर चाहिँ एउटा मनोसामाजिक समस्याको पनि संज्ञा दिनुभएको थियो एकातर्फ चाहिँ त्यो टाइममा मेरो यो ट्रान्समेनसँगको प्रेम सम्बन्ध अनि अर्कोतिर चाहिँ अब परिवार होइन समाज साथीहरूले चाहिँ गर्ने व्यवहार घृणाहरूले गर्दा चाहिँ मैले धेरै चाहिँ स्ट्रगलहरू गर्नु परेको थियो फर्स्टमा चाहिँ आफ्नै मनसँग अनि त्यस पछाडि परिवार समाज अनि साथीभाइहरूसँग गर्नु पर्यो होइन र धेरै समयपछि चाहिँ मैले यो LGBTQIको बारेमा थाहा पाएँ जानकारी पाएँ अनि चाहिँ आफू के हो भन्ने कुरा पनि मैले बुझेँ होइन त्यो चाहिँ धेरै समय पछाडि हाल चाहिँ म मेरो पार्टनरसँग बस्दै आएको लगभग 6 वर्ष जति भयो नेपालको कानुन अनुसार हेर्ने भने हामी दुवैजना चाहिँ विवाहको लागि परिपक्व भइसकेका छौँ तर हाम्रो सम्बन्धले चाहिँ आजसम्म कुनै पनि एउटा वैधानिकता भने पाएको छैन अहिले चाहिँ अब कन्भिन्स गर्दा गर्दा परिवारमा चाहिँ स्वीकार्यता छ होइन र पारिवारिक स्वीकार्यता भए पनि चाहिँ अब राज्यले चाहिँ हाम्रो सम्बन्धलाई कुनै एउटा मान्यता नदिएकोले चाहिँ अब भोलि चाहिँ तिमीहरूको भविष्य के होला भनेर चाहिँ परिवारलाई समेत चाहिँ हाम्रो सम्बन्ध चाहिँ असुरक्षित महसुस भइरहेको छ अनि सम्बन्धले वैधानिकता नपाएकै कारण चाहिँ हामीले चाइल्ड एडप्टहरू गर्न पाइरहेका छैनौँ र यो अब ब्याङ्कमा जोइन्ट अकाउन्टहरू खोल्न होस् या यो लाइफ इन्सुरेन्स गर्न जाँदाको खण्डमा चाहिँ होइन हकवाला बस्नको लागि पनि नाता प्रमाणीकरणको चाहिँ डकुमेन्टहरू माग्ने गर्छ आजभन्दा करिब 2 वर्ष पहिले मेरो स्वास्थ्यमा चाहिँ अब यो सामान्य समस्या भई चाहिँ म अस्पताल जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ उपचारको क्रममा चाहिँ मैले त्यहाँ आफ्नो यो यौनिकताको र आफ्नो सम्बन्धको बारेमा चाहिँ खुलेर बताउँदाखेरि चाहिँ त्यहाँ चाहिँ मलाई डक्टरहरूले चाहिँ मेरो यौनिकतालाई लिएर चाहिँ चाहिने भन्दा बढी अनावश्यक प्रश्नहरू चाहिँ गरिएको थियो र यौनिक तथा लैङ्गिक अल्पसङ्ख्यकहरूको हक अधिकारको लागि नेपालमा आन्दोलन सुरु भएको पनि 22 वर्षभन्दा बढी भइसक्यो तर आजसम्म आइपुग्दा धेरै उपलब्धिहरू पनि हासिल गरेको छ नेपालको संविधानमा पनि हाम्रो यस समुदायलाई सम्बोधन गरिएको छ सम्बोधन गरे तापनि यसको कार्यान्वयन पक्ष चाहिँ फितल हुँदा चाहिँ म जस्ता कयौँ समुदायका साथीहरूले आफ्नो अधिकारहरू चाहिँ अनुभूत गर्न पाइरहनु भएको छैन अनि राज्यले चाहिँ महिला पुरुष सहरा दिने अधिकारबाट वञ्चित गरेकै कारण सँगै बसेका जोडीमध्ये चाहिँ एकजनाको मृत्यु भएमा पार्टनरको सम्पत्तिमा हक नहुने अब घर निकाला गरिदिने जस्ता अथाह समस्याहरू चाहिँ अझै पनि भोग्न बाध्य छन्
Hi everyone, I'm 𝗃𝗿𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗃 from Sri Lanka. I'm going to tell about you my story. This incident happened when I was in school. I had a friend at school and that person was my age. Although I had a good relationship with that friend in the early days, I ended my friendship with that friend due to the influence of other students in the school. The main reason for this is that although this person is identified as a boy, he has a female characteristics and female behaviors. The person was faced insulted not only by the students of the school but also by the teachers. I remember how the senior students of the school attacked this person at one point. Although this directly affected to that person, this series of events indirectly affected to my life. When my friends like to have and start to have heterosexual relationship and they are attracted to opposite sex, no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't think about it. I felt a change in my sexuality as well as in relationship. But then I remember how the people at my school discriminate against that person. Not only was I scared, I always had the question of how society would treat me if they found out my biggest secret. So I was very scared. It was a big hindrance not only for my studies but also for my extracurricular activities. In the meantime, my first love affair began, and we all had, a lot of people have love affairs during school days. But less than a month, I was terrified of falling in love and ended up being insulted by my school friends. At that moment, I thought of committing suicide. I felt like my life was falling apart and I was broke. If the love affair lasted a month, the consequences of the negative reaction of the society to the relationship lasted till the end of my school life. They did not physically attack me, but destroy my mind with hate speech and homophobic comments. The label they gave me still haunted my mind. The LGBT community in the society is constantly confronted with hate speech and homophobic statements. Many people think that being hated by society because of something we were born with is a sin because in a previous life. But I, who believe in nature, have a different opinion. The LGBTIQ community is about social diversity, and homophobic people who do not see diversity only socialize hatred. Therefore, before making hateful statements or homophobic statements, think for a moment about how many lives are ruined because of your hatred and homophobic ideas. Share love and kindness.
That was a really important segment, and we hope it was of interest to you all. We are very keen to amplify the voices of those that our development efforts are designed to support. So now, moving on to our next segment, and this is themed around the subject of our research collaboration with the World Bank, which is on the legal barriers to SOGI inclusion. First, we will hear a little about the research itself from 𝗵𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, who I work with closely and coordinates our team of researchers. And then we will explore some of the sub-themes under the research from 3 CSOs who have provided critical insights. First, we'll hear about public services and social protection with some insights from Armenia, then on access to the labor market with experiences from Cambodia, and then on hate crimes with insights from Georgia. So first I'll introduce 𝗵𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. 𝗵𝗃 is a development practitioner who focuses on the promotion of women's and young people's bodily rights through improved laws and policies. She has worked across 10 countries in Asia Pacific with civil society organizations and builds capacities on legal and policy research and human rights advocacy. Over to you, 𝗵𝗃.
Thank you, Oliver. I'll share my screen quickly. Right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'll be sharing a little bit about the joint study that ADB and World Bank are implementing in Asia and Pacific region. The study is titled Legal Barriers to SOGI Inclusion. A little bit of a context why we are conducting this study. As we know, legal discrimination by sexual and gender minorities remains significant in many countries in the region. Sorry, Oliver, I'll keep my video off during my presentation, if that's okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so going back to the context why we are conducting this study. So the legal discrimination experienced by sexual and gender minorities remains significant in many countries in the region, and it is a huge challenge for them to access education, public services, and labor markets. At the same time, we do not have enough data on social and economic outcomes for sexual and gender minorities, and that also makes it very difficult to tackle their exclusion and these discriminations. So documenting the legal framework that impacts LGBTIQ people and understanding its implications for their ability to contribute and benefit from development, it's a first step and it's a very important step, and that's why we are conducting this study. And the objectives of the study, we aim to provide a framework and a methodology to track SOGI inclusion and drivers of discrimination. We also aim to analyze legal environments and their role in enabling or hindering inclusion. We also are aiming to increase global knowledge on laws and policies that discriminate against sexual and gender minorities, and to eventually incentivize legal reforms in these countries in Asian Pacific region. And in terms of the geographical scope of the study, so these are the countries which are being covered by the study. So we have from Central West, Armenia, Georgia, and Kyrgyzstan. In Southeast Asia, we have Cambodia, Timor-Leste, Thailand, Philippines, and Vietnam included in the study. From South Asia region, we have Bhutan and Nepal. From East Asia, we have Mongolia and China. From Pacific, we have Fiji and PNG. And we have also included two developed countries, Republic of Korea and New Zealand, just for a bit of a comparison of their legal frameworks. What is the research process? The very first important component of our research process is the contributor identification. So who are the local experts who will be providing us data, who will be giving us all the information about laws and regulations in these countries. So we started with that component, and we also prepared a questionnaire. I'll be talking about this questionnaire a little bit more after sharing the process. And then we sent out this questionnaire to our local experts to collect their responses. At the same time, we also conducted desk research. So we have a team of 3 researchers, and all of us conducted desk research for our respective countries. And now we are in the process of coding the survey responses. And after this coding section is completed, we'll cross-verify all the data that we have collected through survey responses with our desk research, and we will prepare our analysis and we'll start writing the report. What are the different sources we have used to collect data? So as I mentioned, we have a set of standardized surveys, and we also conducted desk research. For the standardized surveys, these surveys were shared with more than 600 local experts in the 16 countries where we are conducting the research. And we have received responses from more than 150 contributors. And those contributors include civil society representatives, LGBTIQ individuals, academics who have worked on SOGI issues, lawyers, legal firms, and National Human Rights Institution. From Philippines, we also received a response from one of the legislators as well. For the desk research, we looked at public government records. We also looked at international legal databases, and we looked at the reports produced by human rights organizations. So a bit about the questionnaire and what are the different domains and thematic areas that our research is looking at. So these are the 6 indicator sets that we have prepared to explore the various kinds of discriminations experienced by sexual and gender minorities. I'll be talking about each of the indicator now to share what are the different areas that we're trying to capture. So our first indicator set is criminalization of SOGI. And within this indicator, we are trying to look at laws and regulations that criminalize SOGI, including laws against cross-dressing. So we're trying to capture different nuances as well. We are also looking at laws related to public morality that are often used against sexual and gender minorities. We are also trying to capture laws and regulations that criminalize certain conduct of people who are living with HIV, including their sexual relations. We are also looking at laws and regulations that allow transgender persons who have been convicted of a crime to be incarcerated in cells according to their chosen gender. And I would like to just mention again here that our study is a purely legal study. It's an objective view of what's in the books, what's in the laws and regulations, and we're not at this stage looking at the implementation status of the laws. With respect to access to inclusive education, so we are looking at different aspects here. So what are the different laws and regulations that prohibit discrimination against students and teachers in education settings? What are the different laws and regulations that prohibit 𝗄𝗏-based discrimination during school admission? And laws and regulations that mandate revision of school curricula to make it more inclusive, to include to eliminate any homophobic, any transphobic language from school curricula. Laws and regulations that ensure that people living with HIV also enjoy equal rights in education settings. And finally, we're looking at laws and regulations that enable individuals with diverse 𝗄𝗏 to report and seek remedy whenever they experience discrimination in education settings. For access to inclusive labor market, this is another indicator that we have included in our questionnaire. And for this indicator, we are trying to capture different laws and regulations that prohibit discrimination against employees in their workplaces during recruitment. We are also trying to capture whether there are laws and regulations that mandate equal pay regardless of their 𝗄𝗏. Whether there are any laws and regulations that mandate equal pension or old age benefits for people with diverse 𝗄𝗏. And finally, whether there are any laws and regulations that enable individuals with diverse 𝗄𝗏 to report and seek a remedy for any kind of discrimination they have experienced at workplace, whether during their employment or during the recruitment process. Our next indicator is on access to social services, social protection and public services. So in this indicator, we are trying to capture whether there are laws and regulations that mandate LGBTI individuals equal access to different social protection and public services. So for instance, healthcare insurance, social housing, unemployment benefits, COVID-19 related relief packages, whether there are any laws and regulations that mandate their equal access to these services and interventions. We are also trying to look at inclusion of LGBTI people in other civil domains. So for instance, their inclusion in the national census and whether they have the freedom of association in their respective countries, whether the LGBTI organizations are able to freely implement their programs and their operations in the country. We are trying to look at that as well. And finally, recognition of diverse gender identities on national ID cards and passports. So that is also included in this indicator. Then we have civil and political inclusion. And in this indicator, we are trying to capture whether there are any national action plans on 𝗄𝗏, whether there are any laws and regulations that protect LGBTI individuals' participation in civil and political domains and protect their freedom of association, whether there are any laws and regulations that recognize same-sex marriages and unions and allow them adoption and co-parenting rights and equal access to reproductive assistance for same-sex couples. We're also trying to capture whether there are laws and regulations that allow recognition of trans and gender diverse and intersex individuals without pathologizing, without any requirement for medical proof, etc. We are also trying to look at laws and regulations that protects intersex children from coerced surgeries. Our final indicator is on protection from hate crimes. And in this indicator, we are trying to look at laws and regulations that provide protection from 𝗄𝗏-based hate crimes, including conversion therapy practices. We are also trying to see whether there are any regulations and laws that mandate national human rights institutions and government agencies to monitor 𝗄𝗏-based hate crimes and to collect data on these issues, and whether there are any laws and regulations that mandate training of legal authorities and healthcare professionals to recognize and identify hate crimes against LGBTI people. As I mentioned, we have completed our desk research component, and we have also collected responses from our external contributors. So I'll be briefly sharing our preliminary findings from desk research and survey responses. This is not an exhaustive list of all findings. We are still in the process of coding and analyzing. So some common themes across all 16 sample countries from our studies. People with diverse SOGSC, they face legal discrimination in all sectors and in all examined countries. So for instance, in Kyrgyzstan and PNG, we see that consensual same-sex relations are criminalized. But we also see some positive legal developments that are emerging in Southeast Asian countries. For example, in Thailand, there is currently a same-sex marriage bill underway, and they're in the process of legalizing same-sex marriage. In Vietnam, in 2015, through an amendment in the civil code, they legalized gender recognition, and currently a legal framework on trans rights is underway. We also see across all countries that there are certain indicators and certain thematic areas which are often overlooked across all countries. So that includes education, access to public services and social protection, and civil and political inclusion, and protection from hate crimes. So these are the indicators and themes which are overlooked in laws and regulations across all countries that we are looking at for our study. So 80% of the countries in our sample, they have not enacted any legislation against SOGSC hate crimes. Thailand is the only country in our sample that provides legal protection against SOGSC-based discrimination in educational settings. We have started to see some positive programmatic changes. So these are not laws and regulations, these are just programs that have recently emerged through some policy development. So in Cambodia, for instance, Cambodia has now introduced a SOGSC inclusive comprehensive sexuality education curricula in the schools. We also see some positive developments in the area of access to public services. For example, Nepal has recently announced that they will include LGBTI people in its next census, and they did include third gender category in the last census. So that is a very positive development, and Nepal is the only country in the region that has done so. In terms of access to labor market, that also remains a challenge. Majority of the countries in our sample, they have not enacted legislation against SOGSC-based discriminations at workplace in both public and private sectors. And Thailand is the only country in our sample that provides legal protection against SOGSC-based discrimination at workplace through a specific legislation. We have noticed in most of our countries that national human rights institutions, they are important stakeholders for promotion of SOGSC inclusions. And for example, in Nepal and Republic of Korea, their national human rights commissions are mandated to receive complaints and to provide remedy on SOGSC-based discrimination. So yeah, that's what we have. That's a little bit about the study that we are conducting. Over to you, Oliver.
Thanks very much, Samreen. I think that gave you all a good taste of the work we're doing in conjunction with the World Bank and the sort of, not only the areas that we're looking at, but really how we hope that this will create some positive effects across the region. So to dig down a little bit into some of those issues, we have some really interesting speakers coming up. So first of all, to talk about the access to public services area within his own context in Armenia, we have 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗶 who is the founder of Pink Armenia and is also a board member of the Non-Discrimination and Equality Coalition and president of the Human Rights House Yerevan. So over to you, 𝗵𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I'm glad to share some of the key aspects of public service and social protection issues in Armenia that are LGBT people facing. So first of all, I would like to address the issues of the visibility and acceptance of the community in Armenia. Unfortunately, only few people are out in public, and mostly communities trying to be not visible because of homophobia in the country. If you check different maps, like recently Europe published a Rainbow Europe map, which unfortunately says that Armenia is one of the worst countries in terms of legal protection, social protection, and other issues. That's why discrimination based on sexual orientation, gender identity is also high, and there are a lot of cases that our organization is also registering every year. And actually today we will publish our annual report where we address the cases of discrimination against LGBT people. So regarding COVID-19, when it started in Armenia, people were in lockdown and they couldn't work and they left their jobs. We noticed that a lot of LGBT people didn't have possibility to receive the state financial support. It turned out that a lot of people didn't have work contracts. That's why the support that state was providing was not for those who didn't have work contracts. This created a lot of financial difficulties for our community. Luckily, we managed to support a lot of people, but still, when it comes to legal barriers, we see that employment is a big issue, not only for regarding the contracts, but also a lot of workplaces, they refuse to hire LGBT people. I mean, especially those that are more visible and let's say they cannot hide their identity. Though any sphere of the life is difficult for LGBT people in such a hostile environment, but still organizations can register and work and provide different services and support to our community. Also, I wanted to address the health issues because this is another important thing for our community. When it comes to sexual health, HIV, and similar like services for HIV testing, they exist here. I mean, people can receive free testing more or less in friendly environments. But when it comes to wider aspect of health, then again, there are a lot of difficulties. For example, let's talk about trans people, because we don't have legal gender recognition, and a lot of trans people who want to go through the transition, they cannot find good professionals, doctors who would work with them and who would provide them hormone replacement therapy. So a lot of trans people are just, Googling, trying to find proper hormone therapy devices, or trying to find doctors outside of Armenia, which can be really expensive and not affordable for a lot of them. In this case, again, there can be a lot of health issues, difficulties that they cannot solve here in Armenia. And also for trans people, it is really hard to live in this society, because their identity, their lifestyle, their gender expression is not accepted by the society. And that's why they cannot find jobs. Some of them are involved in sex work, and some of them are trying to hide their identity, having double life, and cannot really express who they are. So I can talk a lot about the issues, but this is just general introduction about the situation. And thank you again for this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Mamikon. That was super interesting and gives a really good context in the area of public services and social protection, and looking at also the different experiences of different sort of subgroups within the wider sexual gender minorities. So next we're going to delve into the theme of access to the labour market, and we have Yara Kong, who is the project coordinator of 𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗶𝗃𝗀𝗀 International Foundation Cambodia. And also that's the organization that put together that great video that we started the event with. Yara has 10 years experience working with LGBTIQ and marginalized communities in Cambodia. So over to you, Yara.
Thank you, Oliver. Currently, Cambodia LGBT communities and activists enjoy relative visibility with a wide range of LGBTIQ events taking place, and with solid support from member and institution of Royal Government of Cambodia. However, we do not have specific law to protect and discriminate LGBT people in Cambodia. In Cambodia, same-sex activities are not a criminal offense. Law and policy in Cambodia are silent on LGBTIQ people and rights. And there is no anti-discrimination legislation sanction for those who violate the rights of LGBTIQ people as well. And also, there is no legislation against LGBTQI discrimination in the workplace. So Cambodians who do not adhere to heteronormative gender expression and identities face a series of barriers in the job market, from discrimination and rejection in the job application process to harassment and bullying. So normally, LGBTQI Cambodian do not feel comfortable to disclose their sexuality or gender identity in the workplace. They limit their coming out to close friends, and in family, they are fear of being discriminated, judged, bullied, and harassed. So the widespread workplace discrimination and lack of government and corporate policy addressing diversity and inclusion in here, there are limited employment opportunities for LGBT people, particularly for those with low education level who often resort to sex work as a source of income. Sex work, however, is illegal in Cambodia, and participants do not consider it as an actual job or occupation. Although many were or still are sex workers, especially in the COVID-19, there are many, they choose the sex work to be the work. The situation is that LGBT people in Cambodia face discrimination in assessing and keeping employment, as well as discrimination and exclusion in the workplace. And transgender women are often harassed or bullied by a boss or colleagues on the basis of their SOG. And LGBT people in Cambodia work principally in certain marginalized sectors, which prevent them from escaping the cycle of poverty. This is exacerbated by widespread family rejection and exclusion in schools and in the wider communities. And lastly, about finance and entrepreneurs, we noticed that capacity building and access to formal credit is a key to give them an opportunity to step out of poverty. However, access to formal credit can be used not only to set up an income generating activity, but also to pay for healthcare, education, which are not free in here. So the access to credit could help LGBT stay out of poverty and to stay out of it. For example, if they can stay healthy, they are more likely to be to work. These are two important mentions of poverty. However, they often lack access to credit. They try to access the formal credit, but they are rejected. They are rejected not because financial institutions might discriminate against them, but because their sexuality, gender identity, or intersex status, but because they are technically unbankable because of the family rejection, community discrimination, because they are extremely poor, no asset, they have no official document, and they are told too many debt and from loan shark as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Yara. So we're a little bit behind on the time, but hopefully we'll be able to catch up. Last but not least, we have 𝗵𝗿𝗀𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀, who will talk about the prevention from hate crimes area. 𝗵𝗿 works as a research lawyer at 𝗃𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗀, dedicated to protection of human rights, including preparing reports for international human rights organizations. Over to you, 𝗵𝗿.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andre. I am a research lawyer at 𝗃𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃, and it is an honor for me to join you today and celebrate International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. So before I dive into the details, I would like to give you a very brief overview of where Georgia stands on the global scale when it comes to protection of LGBTQ+ rights, including protection from hate crimes. In 2014, Georgia signed an association agreement with the European Union, and around that time, the Parliament of Georgia adopted anti-discrimination legislation which prohibits soji-based discrimination. And just recently, in 2022, Georgia formally applied for the EU membership, and therefore Georgia's declared will to become a member of the EU poses lots of obligations on the country, including protection of LGBTQ+ rights and reshaping legislative and policy frameworks for addressing and mitigating hate-motivated crimes. Well, because of that, there have been some positive developments in the past few years with respect to the protection from hate crimes. However, challenges do remain. In 2017, Article 53 was introduced to the Criminal Code of Georgia, according to which committing a crime on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity is an aggravating factor for all crimes determined under the Criminal Code. Therefore, we could say that hate crimes, soji-based hate crimes, are criminalized under Georgian criminal legislation. However, in some cases, because of political or other reasons, prosecutors avoid carrying out investigation and prosecution based on that article, even though circumstances of cases indicate bias and hate. Unfortunately, hate crimes that involve extremist group leaders and Orthodox Church representatives are not properly investigated and prosecuted. For instance, in 2021, last year, Tbilisi Pride had to cancel Pride March in response to a large-scale violence and threats that stemmed from extremist groups, which resulted in physical injuries and even the death of one of the journalists. Even though some perpetrators were imprisoned, the organizers of the hate crimes were not charged with any criminal offenses. Thus, enforcement of hate crime legislation, especially in the context of LGBTQ+ people, is not as effective as it should be. Besides, another positive development that I would like to outline is that the Human Rights Department was established in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. This new department is tasked with monitoring hate crime investigations. However, the department does not carry out investigations, and this is where we see the problem. So at the moment, it is a challenge in the country that we do not have any specific body competent that would be competent and dedicated to carry out hate investigations on hate crimes. And this brings me to another point, which is that the police are trained on how to address hate crimes and how to treat hate crime victims. However, such trainings are not as effective because in most cases, secondary victimization occurs as the police lacks sensitivity, as they deny and minimize the seriousness of reported hate crimes. Therefore, the majority of hate crime incidents remain unreported, as hate crime victims, especially in terms of LGBTQ+ community, do not trust law enforcement authorities. And hate-motivated crimes, more specifically secondary victimization, has a significant impact on social and economic inclusion of LGBTQ+ people. Secondary victimization leads to even greater humiliation, degradation, and isolation. And the very distinctive characteristic of hate crime is that it affects not only a particular victim, but also the whole community and the group which this victim belongs to. So the consequences are much wider and widespread. Therefore, other members of LGBTQ+ community can feel not only at risk from future attacks, but may be as psychologically affected as if they were themselves the victims. Therefore, this constant fear of being subject to hate crime affects social inclusion of the community. To sum up, Georgia indeed has implemented some key reforms to address SOGI-based hate crimes. However, there are shortcomings in the implementation of these laws and reforms, which do create barriers to the members of the community. So this is what I wanted to say in a nutshell, and I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the video. Thank you so much, Anri. I didn't yet see if there are any questions, or if anyone in the audience or from any of our teams at ADB has something they would like to say, then please either just turn on your mic or put your hand up. I'm not seeing anything at the moment, and we are a little bit up against the time. So I'm sorry we haven't had the chance for too much interaction on this occasion, but we will we'll take a mental note of that to do a little bit more of that next year. So just to say, thank you very much indeed to our panel who took us through, lots of the issues on legal barriers. I think the challenges with data collection are a common theme that we see arising, but also I think we got a really good sense of some of the sort of real issues on the ground and all the complexity surrounding those. And I think it was also great to hear from maybe some countries where certainly in ADB events we don't hear from quite as often. So I'm very pleased that we managed to do that. So we'll now move to closing remarks, and we're very lucky indeed to have Chantal Wong join us today. Chantal is the United States Executive Director, and she has made history by being the first out lesbian ambassador to represent the United States. This appointment is historic, and we are very honored to have Chantal join us today. In her previous roles, she has been Vice President for Administration and Finance at the Millennium Challenge Corporation and Budget Director of the NASA Space Agency. She has also held leadership positions at the Office of Management and Budget, Departments of Treasury and Interior, and the Environmental Protection Agency. She previously worked at ADB in 1999 as an environment specialist and was subsequently appointed by President Bill Clinton as US Alternate Director in the early 2000s. So over to you, Chantal.
Thank you, Oliver. So good day, everyone, to all of you, and thank you all for joining ADB's event for International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, Biphobia for 2022. I am pleased to join you as the newest member of the ADB board, currently actually the only woman executive director here. But more importantly, as Oliver has mentioned, by virtue of my position, the first out lesbian, and out person of color U.S. ambassador in the history of the United States. So prior to my confirmation by the U.S. Senate, and since Bill Clinton nominated 𝗵𝗿𝗶𝗃𝗍𝗃 to be the first openly gay ambassador of the United States to Luxembourg, that's 30 years ago, 24 openly gay white men, both career foreign service and political appointees, have been confirmed as U.S. ambassadors. So at this point, I'm very hopeful that I will be joined by others like me very soon. And I hope my appointment helps reinforce the commitment of the United States government and the wider development community to equality on the basis of SOGI, sexual orientation and gender identity. For example, on February 4th, 2021, President Biden issued a presidential memorandum on advancing the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex persons around the world. That memorandum, for the first time, directed executive departments of the United States and agencies engaged abroad to ensure that the United States diplomacy, both diplomacy and foreign assistance, promote and protect the human rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons everywhere. So I'm glad to be here to represent the United States here at the ADB, and I'm keenly interested to be supporting ADB's efforts to outreach people from LGBTQI background, who are most vulnerable and excluded from benefits of development. And I think this afternoon we heard very many powerful stories. I'm very moved by all of it that I've heard. I would like to thank Louise Court, Director of Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank, for joining us today, and for the collaborative efforts of your team on our joint study of the legal barriers to SOGI inclusion. I'm very impressed of the comprehensiveness of the issues that you're going to be looking at and including in your study. To note that actually it's not that long ago, the U.S. More recently, because of this presidential memorandum by the President Biden, that we have now included in the passport form for the United States a category that is not just male, female, but a third category. So we're also making progress in the United States on this front. Then I would also like to thank DG Kanji from South Asia Department for his remarks and his enthusiastic participation of his department in making this event happen alongside Oliver's team at SDCC. I know that DG Ken and I have actually worked together from my previous time, so I'm really looking forward to working with him on these important issues. It was also a pleasure to hear from such a diverse and knowledgeable array of speakers. So a big thank you for all of you for your time today and for giving us the opportunity to learn from your experiences. And finally, a particular thank you to the team behind the scenes for making everything run so smoothly. May 17 marks an important, an incredibly important day for the LGBTQI community. And we're delighted to mark this year's theme, our bodies, our lives, our rights, in collaboration with our World Bank colleagues. Together, we have made excellent progress in groundbreaking research, particularly on the legal barriers to sexual and gender minority inclusion across Asia and the Pacific. Legal barriers have profound impact, and we've heard this in many of the stories on individual lives, from considerations related to social protection, the labor markets, access to core public services such as health and education. Understanding these legal barriers is really the first step in better understanding the complex realities that our communities face across the globe, but particularly here in this region. And I'm really encouraged over the last few weeks. I've learned a lot more. I'm very encouraged by the progress made in our South Asia department under the leadership of DG Kenji in their innovative work on the complex and intersectionality dimensions of vulnerability. It was definitely a pleasure to hear directly from individuals. Like I said, these stories have been very, very powerful for me to hear, whom they've been working with. And it's definitely ultimately individuals with a focus on poor, the vulnerable, and the excluded, to whom our projects and our interventions here at ADB are dedicated to. One of the things that I'm going to be focused on going forward, actually, I'm very excited to be learning about and exploring some of the economic cases for LGBTQI inclusion in our development intervention. So that's something that I would like to focus on going forward. But as we move forward into next year, we celebrate the progress, certainly that has been highlighted here that we've made, and yet we do know from our communities that the progress has yet to come on many of our collaborations on these important issues. So thanks to all of you for participating, for coming, for spending the time with us, and we look forward to working with you collaboratively going forward. So thank you. Over to you, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Edie Chantal, and thank you to all our speakers and our audience for all your interest and all your great comments. Thank you, DG Kenichi and Director Louise Cord, and also for the support that we've had today from DG Ramesh from our Southeast Asia department and Canadian ED Chris Pandey, who have both joined us today and been very supportive. So with such an array of key support, I think we can definitely make progress on this agenda. And I wish you all a safe and successful day, and we hope to see you all soon. Take care. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining. Bye-bye.